There was a house near my location that earned the nickname Ghost House because it had been left unfinished for a long time and remained vacant for years. The house was situated on a somewhat sketchy block with many other houses that appeared abandoned or neglected, as evidenced by overgrown grass and weeds. One night, my friends Jenny, Luca, Kylie, and I were bored and decided to drive around town. After grabbing some fast food, Luca suggested that we explore the ghost house, actually going inside. The girls and I agreed, and we parked a few houses down the street. The street was poorly lit, with only one streetlight, leaving the rest of the area in darkness. The surrounding houses seemed abandoned too, despite some cars being parked in the driveways. We made sure to be quiet as we got out of the car and approached the ghost house. The sight of the unfinished two-story house in the middle of the night gave us an eerie feeling. Our first task was finding a way inside, so we attempted to open the front door, but it was locked. We then went around the house trying each window until one of them slid open. Jenny, being the smallest, climbed in through the window and proceeded to unlock the back door for the rest of us. To our surprise, the back door was already unlocked, indicating that anyone could have entered. We entered the house, which had a distinct smell of wood mixed with a pungent odor resembling rotten cat urine. The first floor was more finished than expected, with multiple spacious rooms, although devoid of furniture. We split up and explored different areas. I went upstairs to the second floor where the walls were less finished, with exposed framing. While upstairs, I heard noises from downstairs, indicating that my friends were being a bit too loud. Trying to get their attention, I descended the stairs noisily. Finding the second floor relatively empty, I returned downstairs and bumped into Jenny, who asked about the upstairs area. I mentioned that it was somewhat unfinished, but she decided to check it out anyway. As for me, I began searching for the basement and discovered it behind a brown door beneath the stairs leading upstairs. Upon opening the door, I was hit by the same cat urine smell mentioned earlier. I walked down the steps and noticed that the basement appeared more rundown compared to the rest of the house. The concrete floor was stained with a brownish rusty substance that resembled either paint or potentially blood. As I surveyed the mostly empty space, I spotted a small wooden chair and a table with a book on it. To my surprise, it was the Holy Bible. Just then I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Speaking slightly louder than a whisper, I called out, "Hey, come check this out." When I received no response, I turned around, but there was no one near the stairs. Instead, I noticed a woman with long, unkempt hair sitting against the wall. It took me a moment to realize that she wasn't Jenny or Kylie, she was some random woman. She stared directly at me. Suddenly, one of the girls upstairs screamed, followed by Luca calling my name, urging us to leave. Overwhelmed with shock, the only words I could muster were "holy," and I quickly ran out of the basement and up the stairs. My friends were already rushing out through the back door. I had no idea what they had witnessed, but I followed closely behind. We sprinted back to the car without stopping, and as we drove away, I asked them what they had seen. They described seeing two men standing in one of the empty rooms on the first floor. Dark objects were scattered on the floor, but they couldn't determine what they were in the brief moments before fleeing. They couldn't see the men's faces, but their statures indicated that they were males. I have no clue what was happening in that house, whether it was a satanic cult or simply homeless individuals. Regardless, I would never be persuaded to return to that house, even if someone paid me. I no longer live in that town or state, so I am unaware of the house's current status. However, based on the most recent Google Maps image from 2019, it appears that the construction was still unfinished. My friends and I live in a beautiful, quiet suburban neighborhood. It's the kind of place where nothing dangerous ever happens, except for the story I'm about to share. A few summers ago, my friend Alex and I were the mischievous type, always looking for trouble. Looking back, I struggled to justify our behavior. Perhaps it was just our teenage rebellion in action. Since we lived on the same street and there wasn't much to do on weekdays, we often found ways to entertain ourselves. In our neighborhood, there was a well-known mansion sitting atop a hill. It had been abandoned for as long as anyone could remember. It wasn't anything special. Every kid in town had been inside. The rooms were stripped of anything valuable, and finding a wall free of spray paint was nearly impossible. The mansion's location at the edge of a massive cemetery added to its creepy vibe. For Alex and me, this mansion became our default plan B whenever we had nothing else to do. We would graffiti the walls, hang out on the roof, or just relax and smoke. This story takes place on one of those nights. It was around 3 a.m. on a Wednesday, and Alex and I had been stood up by a couple of girls we had made plans with. Feeling disappointed, we decided that throwing rocks at the cemetery mansion would be a decent way to release some energy. If we had been sober, we might have been more cautious about doing something so foolish. But it was late, it was summer, and we didn't care. I convinced Alex not to drive since we were a bit drunk, and after a 20-minute walk, we reached the top of the hill. As we approached the mansion, we were met with the familiar yet eerie sight of vines twisting and hanging from the weathered bricks. Most of the windows were shattered, and the rooftop had menacing points. It definitely had a sinister feel, especially at such an ungodly hour. Without any warning, Alex picked up a stone and threw it towards the house. It sailed gracefully before smashing through a fourth-floor window. The sound of shattering glass confirmed the hit. Amused by Alex's throw, I picked up a rock and punctured one of the second-floor windows. Just above the fourth floor, there was a small attic window that stood lonely as the highest point of the house. Alex challenged me to hit it, but I missed several throws in frustration. Giving up, I let out an aggravated sigh. That's when Alex confidently picked up another rock, saying, "Watch this." He focused on the tiny target, and with a forceful throw, the rock shattered the attic window with a satisfying crash. I was shocked by his accuracy. For a moment, we stood there admiring what had just happened. However, our fascination was interrupted when we noticed a dark object flying out of the shattered window and descending towards us. Confused, I literally jumped back, unsure of what I had witnessed. As the object landed on the gravel in front of us, we both looked down to find it was the exact same rock Alex had thrown. It had a distinctive Z imprint on one of its faces. We stood there in silence, feeling shaken. It was too late for other kids to be doing the same thing we were, but that was the only explanation we could come up with. We concluded that it must have been a group of teenagers trying to mess with us, an idea that actually excited us. The devious grins on our faces revealed our plan to get the jump on them before they could scare us. Silently, we made our way to the front door, ducking under a thick vine hanging from the towering pillars above. The door was slightly ajar, as it had long been misaligned from its hinges and didn't close properly. We stepped inside as quietly as possible, allowing our eyes to adjust to the minimal light and our noses to the scent of mildew and rotting wood. We slowly climbed the creaky stairs, unable to silence the sounds of shifting wood beneath our feet. Reaching the fourth floor, we found ourselves at the base of a final staircase that led to a small wooden door, presumably the entrance to the attic. Alex, taking the lead, put his hand on the doorknob and looked back at me. I nodded, and in one fluid motion he flung the door open. The first thing that struck me was the overwhelming smell that caused me to take a few steps back in disgust. It was a putrid odor, like death and decaying matter. Something was clearly rotting in that room. Alex covered his nose and cautiously entered the room. I hesitated, feeling more apprehensive, but I decided it was better to stay by his side than be alone on a pitch-black staircase. The sight inside was even worse than the smell. We found ourselves staring at a tiny room with a white pentagram painted on the floor. There were a few unlit candles and a closet door that we dared not open. The smell seemed to emanate from that closet, and I was worried Alex would want to investigate further. Surprisingly, the room was empty, devoid of any people. At that point, I had seen enough. The situation was starting to frighten me, and the urge to leave grew stronger. I turned towards the door, and that's when I saw it. As I looked down the staircase, I saw two figures wearing cloaks, gazing back up at me. I cursed and ran towards Alex. Just then, we heard stomping footsteps coming up the stairs from behind us. Realizing we were trapped, I prepared myself for a fight, bracing for whoever it was about to burst through the door. In that moment, Alex yelled, "Dude, come on!" I whipped around to see Alex halfway out of the shattered window, presumably stepping onto the roof. Without hesitation, I followed suit. As soon as I made it onto the roof, I heard the door forcefully open. We ran across the roof towards the known entrance, not waiting to see if we were being pursued. The darkness made it nearly impossible to see, and one wrong step could have sent us tumbling to our deaths. I closely followed Alex, and together we reached the entrance, a small hatch leading to a ladder. However, Alex failed to open the hatch. It was locked from the inside. Just as frustration set in, we heard a booming voice coming from a distance, yelling, "They went that way." It was a freakishly deep voice, and to this day, It remains the scariest thing I've ever heard anyone say. Without thinking, I stomped on the hatch as hard as I could with my right foot, causing it to crash open with a loud noise that revealed our position to anyone inside the house, or anyone chasing us on the roof. The impact made me fall into the hole, but I managed to grab onto the ladder with my hands, preventing serious injury. Alex screamed at me to go, so I climbed down the ladder as fast as my legs would allow despite the pain. We sprinted down another set of stairs and burst out of the back door, quickly jumping the fence and running into the cemetery. Alex seemed to be fine. In fact, he was laughing. But I was terrified, my mind in a state of chaos. Squatting behind a gravestone in the cemetery provided some comfort I never expected. Alex and I kept a watchful eye on the mansion, half expecting someone to chase after us. We waited, and just when we thought it was safe, we saw a group of 4 or 5 figures dressed in cloaks, frantically searching under bushes and trees. With cautious steps, we crept closer into the cemetery until we were certain there was no chance of being spotted in the darkness. We hopped the fence on the other side and haven't returned to that house since. To this day, I can only assume that we stumbled upon some kind of cult meeting or ritual. Why they chose to perform it in an abandoned house is something I still question.